guys, it's Sam and this is my May wrap up. So the beginning of May felt like so long ago for some reason. May was a month that went by really fast but also seemed to drag reading wise. So the books that I read at the beginning of the month, I'm like, wasn't that 3 months ago? But let's get into it. I read 6 things. So the first book that I picked up in May was the Fridge Monologues by Catherine M. Valente. This is a short story sort of essay collection, and it is a bind up of all of these women who have been fridged in comics. So it doesn't follow actual, real women comic book characters, but you can tell who it's supposed to be. So you definitely have like Gwen Stacy, whoever was the original fridge woman who actually was stuffed in a fridge, some of these, but also some of the characters are superheroes themselves. So that's an interesting take too, because you have these characters who were also had their own story and then they were fridged because of their male love interest. So it's interesting. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't. That's kind of the nature of short story collections in general. I find that like they're very rarely 5-star reads for me because, or even 4 stars, because there's a variety. And I tend to feel okay to about most of the short stories, and then some I'm like, oh, I really like that. But a couple of these I found just a little bit jarring with the like type of story. Like there was definitely a Harley Quinn character in here, and I was like, I don't know all of the canon of Batman, but I was like, I don't think has she died before? I don't know. I don't know. In one timeline she probably has, but it was just a little bit too on the nose for me with a lot of it. I felt like I wanted a little bit more complex discussion of this besides just like, this sucks. It's like, yes, more please? So like, can we get into a little bit more discussion? So I was expecting just a little bit more from this, and I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The second book that I read was Throne of Jade by Naomi Novik. This is the second book in the Temeraire series, which is the Napoleonic Wars with Dragons. This was also the May, was it the May? It was a Patreon book pick. So every month my Patreon supporters get to vote in a poll for a book I'll read and review, and this was the winner for either May or April, I forget, but I think for April, because I started this book on audio, ended up not liking the audio. So I was really struggling with the audio. The narrator's voice was great, but it lulled me to sleep. I think I've talked about this before, that there's certain accents and voices that I find so soothing that I can't focus. A lot of East Asian accents are like this with me. I know this because in my college and undergrad, I had a few teachers who were East Asian, and I couldn't stay awake in their classes, but it wasn't because the material's bad. It just was like, I found their voices so soothing. He has like some kind of like, I forget now, like Scottish or some kind of British accent that is very like deep and rolling, and I just was like, I don't even know what he's saying, and it's not even hard to follow. But I can't follow it. So I ended up switching over to my physical copy, and that was a better choice. I still didn't love this book. So this is more of a journey book, and the place that they're going is really interesting once they get there. But about like 80% of the book is just the journey there. And I'm like, we could have skipped a lot of the journey and had them just being there. And that was a little bit irritating because there's so many cool aspects of the place that they were going, and with like dragon lore and everything. And most of the time was spent on a boat going there. So this was still like enjoyable. I still really like the interactions between like Temeraire and Lawrence, who's his dragon rider, and they have this like really good relationship. Temeraire is a talking dragon, so he's basically like a large cat dog, and I really enjoy him, but this just wasn't as fun and endearing as the first book because there was a lot more side characters and other side dragons in the first book, and the setting was just a lot more fun, and this was just a lot of waiting to get to a spot that we didn't spend much time in, which I found kind of irritating. But I've had a few people tell me that the series gets like better after this and starts to kind of find its way, so I'm looking forward to that. I do plan on continuing with the series. It's just not at the top of my list because I tend to remember most key points about this story, so I don't feel the need to like binge it because it's not that complicated. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I then picked up Save the Date by Morgan Matson. This is a YA contemporary story about a girl who's part of a larger, I think 5 kids family, and her mom is this famous comic artist who has written the story of kind of their lives a bit growing up, and her comic is coming to an end, and also one of the sisters is getting married at the house, and they've all kind of separated. The main character is the youngest, and she just wants everyone to come together and be like happy and to kind of like relive their time together and all this stuff. And there's also some family divide because one of the siblings has kind of become like the black sheep of the family, and there's like family drama. So I love Morgan Matson's books. I always find them super endearing. I love the family stuff that's always in all of them. She does family dynamics really well, and also usually friend stuff as well. This I wanted to read because I really wanted a romance, and it wasn't super romancy in my opinion. It was a lot more family dynamics focused, and that's not the book's fault. That was just my assumption because Morgan Matson tends to have the family plot and the romance plot kind of be equal, and this was much more family plot and the romance was very much in the background. I also found elements of the romance story a bit like predictable, like I knew where that was going in a way that like wasn't quite fun. Sometimes I find her romances still a little predictable, but like in a soothing, comforting, like I know where this is going and like I like this, like I can recognize the beats and like yay. But I didn't find it so much with this, so I didn't really find the characters like that endearing, and I also found there to be like a lot of miscommunication stuff happening, and the main character, she grew throughout the story, which was really nice, but I found her to be like incredibly naive to the point that I was like, why aren't you self-aware enough to realize some of these things that you do realize at the end, but like, girl, why did it take you so long? So for that reason, this wasn't the most enjoyable Morgan Matson for me. I end up giving it 3.75 out of 5 stars. Again, really good family dynamics, but not my favorite of hers. I will still continue to read her contemporaries because her YA contemporaries are like my favorite. It's like her and Jandy Nelson are like creme de la creme for me. Is Jandy coming out with a new book soon? Because I need it real bad. Anyway, putting this down now. Jandy, please, I need your angst. Then we have A Poison, Dark, and Drowning by Jessica Cluess. This is the second book in the Kingdom on Fire series, I believe, the first book being A Shadow Bright and Burning. I love this series, and it's like a solid 4-star series. There's a lot of problems with it, but I just love it. So in this world, there are 3 different kinds of magic users: magicians, sorcerers, and witches. Magicians and witches have been exiled and just like condemned for some previous bad behavior, and the sorcerers are kind of like in charge and everything and are part of the government. And also this is set in Victorian London, by the way, Victorian England. So there are these magical eldritch beings that have come into the world from another dimension, and the sorcerers and the magic users are in charge of fighting that. And our main character, Henrietta, was discovered in the first book to be a female sorcerer, and she's wrapped up in all the stuff when really there are no women sorcerers and all this stuff. Anyway, second book I really enjoyed. There are, like I said, elements that can probably grate on some people's nerves. There's just something about this that just like I really enjoy. I like her main character. She's believable for the time period, but not so time period feeling because it is an alternate history kind of thing that you get annoyed with her. Like she still follows some of the like morals and regulations of her time, but also bucks against them a bit, which is nice, but not too much that you're like, a character could never do this in that time period. The thing that people might find annoying is that there's like basically a love square. I know, but I really like Henrietta, so I'm like, of course they're in love with her, but I don't feel like all of them have equal weight necessarily, so there's ones I like more than others. The thing that I also like is that all of the men in the love square have like a dark edge to them, so there's none that's like the good choice, or like that there's a lot of like darkness in this story and a lot of like twistedness in this story. So the one ship that I liked from the first book got a little bit more real in this book, and even that was like, I don't know, like it plays around with like some morals and some questionable like dark behavior and things like that. So there's really no like good and pure choice, and I really like that about it. And just some of the themes that this explores and like how dark it is, and yeah, I really enjoy it. It's a solid 4 stars. Again, it's not perfect. There's like, oh, also the fair in here at some point. There's a lot of themes of like really cool different kinds of magic and like dark eldritch beings and like darkness in the characters and fae and all this stuff that's thrown in here to make it like a really fun, solid, good time. So I'm looking forward to the last book in the series. Don't really know where it's gonna go. Cautiously excited. This series has been solid 4 stars for me the whole way through. Also really underrated. More people should read it. I know there's a love square. I know that like I'm not selling it when I tell you there's a love square, but like if you can get over the love square, it's good. I then picked up Witchwood by Tahada Mafi. This is technically the second book in like a companion series, but you don't have to have read the first book, which is Furthermore. This is a middle grade story set in like fantastical lands and such. And this follows the main character of Laylee, who is a mortishore. So she washes, in her world, she washes the bodies of the dead in order to release their souls to travel on. And she has like magical abilities involved with that, but she is dying because she's the only one, due to certain circumstances, that is doing this job, and so she's draining herself and her magic. And so some of the characters from the first book come to her world to help her because that's part of their kind of like quest. But this book is really good about filling in things about the first book to remind you, because I forgot, because I didn't really like Furthermore that much, or if you haven't actually read the first book, because you can read them like out of order. So I end up really enjoying this. Like I mentioned, I didn't love Furthermore. I've done a full review on this, by the way, too, so I'll link that on the screen for more in-depth thoughts. But I really enjoyed the setting of this. I liked the character with a link between life and death. It's always like a thing of mine, a trope that I really enjoy. And I really enjoyed our main character in here more than the main character in Furthermore. And the characters are growing up a little bit, so a little bit like older middle grade. I think like the oldest character is 14, and then I think they're like 13 and 12 or something. So that's just like fun, and I just found this a lot more endearing. I enjoyed the flowery writing. I think it lent itself really well to this, and I just really enjoyed it. So I liked how she interacted, this main character, with the rest of the kids in the series. So if the series continues and she's in them, I might think about continuing. Again, companions you can kind of pick up wherever, and you don't necessarily have to follow them in any certain order. So if the next synopsis in the companion series appeals to me, I would consider picking it up. It kind of redeemed Tahada Mafi's middle grade in my eyes for me. I gave Witchwood 4 out of 5 stars. And the last thing that I read in May was Bound by Mark Lawrence. This is a short story that takes place between Grey Sister and Holy Sister, which is the second and third book of the Book of the Ancestor series. I ended up starting to read Holy Sister last month on audio, and I had a few people tell me, oh girl, you should really read Bound. It takes place between the two books, but there's some like essential story bits that you need to have. And I was like, okay, so I stopped, read this. It's like 64 pages, very short story, but it has to do with some interactions and dynamics between some of the main characters, between Nona, Ara, and Regal specifically, with a couple other people like mixed in, but like really it's like their relationship. And it is pretty essential to know some of these things that happened and some of the like interactions between them, because they are one of the kind of like love interesty bits of the story. This does not have a very heavy romance focus. There's these characters kind of not knowing what to do with one another, and then there's a set of two nuns who are deeply in love and have like an established relationship. But overall the series is like 5 to 10%, if that, romancy stuff, romancy feelings, and most of it is like grim dark, the world is ending, get shit done, everything's crazy. So yeah, so I really enjoyed this. It was, again, short, like quick, but did feed into the rest of the story, and I'm also like, why didn't you put that in the main books? But it's fine. This was enjoyable. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So like I mentioned, I did start listening to Holy Sister because a couple of you were asking about it, and I am going to probably talk about that in my June wrap-up. I've just been like intermittently putting it off because I don't want the series to end. So yeah, but that is coming. So that is it for all the books that I read in May. Comment below, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and then what your favorite book that you read in May was. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.